that certainly was an interesting viewpoint about that. There may be something to it. There was supposed to have been a race of dwarves that lived under England that created these. They were quite advanced in metallurgy, and they had created these beautiful swords with holes in them that would sing when you would swing them through the air. And they had caches of gold and everything, which William the Conqueror supposedly double-crossed them and took the gold and sealed up their little kingdom down there. But it was unearthed in recent times under this Englishman's estate. They actually found records written in ancient Norwegian that this was the case, that had actually occurred.
Well, I talking to a psychic about a year ago. I asked her how many intelligent races or civilizations or groups, I mean types of beings, do live in our solar system, on the 12 planets of our solar system. I know from other sources that all of them, and probably most, if not all of the moons, are populated, including bases on Mercury. The polar regions of Mercury are not that hot at all. Even our government has a base there. And I was told that there are 1,200 different types of intelligent beings living in the solar system, which puts way above, I mean, even the wildest imagination and all the crazy stories that we can put together, from tabloids, from the folklore. Even they won't be enough to foot the bill. So probably the universal reality is way more complex than we can even imagine. Anyway, let's go back to the interface between, I mean, back to the magic of socialism. Al, I would like to give us some thought from your kind of an engineering background about, have you had any stories of contacts between the Germans and some alien race?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
He was meditating. He wasn't sleeping.
Yeah. Give us a quick overlook of everything that we talked about until this time. Basically, what are your feelings on that?
Well, I agree with you about the German societies, the secretness of the German Nazi society, the fact that it was magically based in many respects, that the entire SS operation was a religious order, really, rather than a military order. They had ranks within it, which were actually positions in terms of a religious hierarchy, and they used those ranks to determine the levels of people in terms of their positions, however they determined them. It was not a political disposition in the SS. It was religious metaphysical. And this fact has been lost to historians almost entirely. Trevor Ravenscroft is one of the few in recent years who has come up with the correct analysis on this. Of course, he was English, and his background is very curious. He met, during the period prior to World War II, the man who had been Hitler's right-hand man advisor up until the time when this other gentleman, whose name now escapes me, decided that he had had enough of Hitler and his regime and knew where it was going and wanted out and fled to England before the war started. After the war was over and Hitler was allegedly dead, he and Ravenscroft met, and he said, "Someday I will tell you the real story of the Third Reich." Ravenscroft, of course, was very interested. But he did not get anything more than little pieces and anecdotes from this man throughout the years until the time when this man, who had been Hitler's right-hand man, decided things had changed in world history and would now be the time to tell the story.
This is supposedly the...
Walter Johannes Stein was the guy.
Walter Stein, yes. He says to Mr. Ravenscroft, "Okay, now's the time. I'm going to tell you the whole story." And 3 days later, he dropped dead of a heart attack before he ever uttered a single word, other than the notes which Ravenscroft had mentally made over the years of talking with this man, which was sort of beating around the bush of the subject, and he never got to the heart of it. So it's very interesting that there were a few people who knew the real facts inside as to what was going on in the Third Reich. Among other people who knew the facts, of course, was Winston Churchill, who had his own battery of astrologers, if you will, who was trying to outmaneuver Hitler because Hitler made all of his moves based on astrology. And this was another interesting point in that there was a psychological, an astrological war going on as well as a military war.
So this is astrological socialism on top of
Right. Right. I'm sure none of the foot soldiers knew anything about what was going on. But Herr Himmler undoubtedly did and was right in the middle of it. That is interesting because here was Hitler, who was the head of a very powerful nation and who was very thoroughly steeped in magic and symbolic magic and, of course, other aspects of magic under basically the Luciferian group. And here he was fighting another group, his arch enemies, of course, being, as he called it, the Jewish group. He never said the Jewish people, but the Jewish hierarchy, the Zionists, really. And they, of course, had come under the sway long ago, if you look at this from a magical viewpoint, under the sway of Ahriman and the Ahrimanic order. So we had two groups, the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic, literally fighting a war on the physical level here on Earth as we know it. And these two groups were manipulating vast, powerful operations. And they were conducting their own operations at another level, in another area, if you will. Another reality might be the right term, but certainly not at the physical level so far as they, the leaders, were concerned.
The Luciferic and the Ahrimanic orders of beings, these are supermaterial,
Yes.
basically angelic level beings with spirit bodies, energy bodies that do not live in our dimension. They can materialize in our reality, but normally they reside elsewhere. So in order to better interface with the material beings of our reality, these spiritual beings would very often subcontract other alien races that are also material but are higher developed than we are and can more easily contact with the spiritual beings. So that's why we always have this pyramid of celestial beings on the top, regardless of whether they are Luciferian or Trinitarian or Ahrimanic
Or whatever.
then the subcontracting levels, multi-tiered levels of aliens, different levels of development. And finally, there are the secret societies on Earth
Down at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak.
absolutely to the bottom of the pyramid.
And then under them, of course, the grounded Earth, where all of the foot soldiers, the warriors, and the war makers, and the munitions makers, and the politicians, and everyone else fight it out.
There was a Canadian fellow a few years ago that mentioned who the two races were in conflict. One was called the Psychians, that came from a star system called On.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he said he had an actual, wasn't an out-of-the-body thing, but he had actually gone, was taken to the realms of the blonde Psychians. And the other group, the evil group, the negative group, service to self, came from Ursa Major, and they had a base or something in Draco, Draconis.
Draconians.
Yeah, it's not too far from here, and they have a